Hey guys, what I'm about to show you is truly incredible, without any exaggeration. Those games blew my mind. Hikaru Nakamura, number 2 player in the world in chess, has just played a match against a strong chess engine, Leela. And the chess engine was playing down a rook and it destroyed Hikaru in a match. It was a 3+2 match, blitz, 3 minutes per game plus 2 seconds edit per move. And Hikaru, at some point, he just started playing and he lost 5 games in a row. He just could not do anything about this bot. I will show you in this video 4 great games from this match. I will show you how Hikaru managed to find the right strategy to combat the bot. And I will show you how the bot absolutely demolishes everyone. Leela, Rook's odds bot, you can play it as well, by the way, on the internet. You can find it online. So let me show this to you. This is crazy, guys. Fasten your seatbelts. Okay, game number 1. Hikaru is playing with the white pieces. So technically, it's not even just a rook odds, because usually a person playing with odds is playing white. So it's a rook and move odds, even bigger, because you have the right to move first and an extra rook. So Hikaru chooses e4, and Leela plays an opening that I like playing with black, g6. It's called the modern defense. The only difference is when I play it, I have a rook on a8, and on h8 I have 2 rooks and it has just 1. So h4, it is one of the moves to play against such an opening. The idea is to push h5, and initially in the first games Hikaru was kind of confident in himself. I was watching his stream and he was like, okay, I need to win, I have an extra rook and I need to open up some files. And like that's what he's doing. He wants to open the h file for his rook. And the meta strategy here should be to trade the pieces or to open up the files for your rooks, because you have 2 and your opponent has just 1. So c5, h5, very logical. Knight c6. Here probably Hikaru should have traded, and black has to take with the f-pawn, and now the rook is kind of active, so that would be logical, but instead Hikaru decided to wait a little bit. He went knight c3, developing the knight, very logical, but now g5. Now Leela decides to not allow any opening of the files. And you know what? I had a podcast episode, I recorded a podcast on this channel with the inventor of this Leela odds bot. So Leela is a strong chess engine. It's been around for ages, like for, I don't know, at least 8 years, maybe 7 years, something like that. But those bots appeared, I think, like a year ago, and Grandmaster Larry Kaufman is one of the geniuses behind them. So they trained this neural network to play with odds, because if you play stockfish, the strongest bot out there, with odds, it's easy, because stockfish makes objectively the best moves in the position, and Leela makes not necessarily objectively the best move, but it makes the move that makes it hardest for the person playing against it to win this game, or even to draw. Even down a queen, it can defeat most players, because it muddies the waters. It creates chaos on the board where it can outcalculate any human, because a human is not a computer. So that's basically, in short, what these bots do. And for a longer version, check out the podcast. It will be linked in the description of this video. So let's continue with the game. d3, h6, f4. So Hikaru tries still to open this file, to maybe later push this pawn, and to weaken the king's position of black, because, well, g5, h6 are not the moves that you want to make when your king is still in the center, when your pieces are not developed. e6, g3. Now d5, black takes the center, but still the position is completely winning for white. But suddenly black takes over the initiative. d4 first pushes the knight back. Now e5, and takes, and suddenly, you know what? Like, this pawn chain is very strong. It's not clear how white should proceed, and during the game Hikaru was a bit so frustrated here. He was like realizing that he's getting outplayed and he did not know what to do, where to put the pieces. For example, the engine stockfish suggests here as one of the top moves a3, which is not that obvious, or knight h3, which is also not that obvious. You want to put your knight on f3 usually. And Hikaru here goes knight f3, which is more logical but less good. Bishop e7, h6. He decides to give up this pawn to have the file open. Kind of logical, but a pawn is a pawn. Black takes. bishop d2, king f8. A very subtle move. You just want to manually castle your king because the rook is good on the h file. It's protecting the h6 knight. c4. Hikaru is trying to do something probably on this side of the board because on the king side, black is controlling everything. Black is not allowing white any infiltration here. Black's pawns are awesome. a6, queen c2, bishop e6, finishing the development. Even though black is down a rook, black should have a rook here. Still, it's black who's in the driver's seat. Like, white does not have any clear plan here. Maybe some pawn breaks like this, but this square is controlled like 3 times by the black pieces, and the queen can join them. And it's hard to break for white, to break through. So white decides to castle lone, to launch an attack probably with the rooks over there. But there is no attack. It's not clear how to attack for white. And black counterattacks immediately, b5, even though black is down a rook. Because the king is here. And when you have this opposite side castling situation, you need to get to the king first. It doesn't matter if you're down a rook even. If you get to the king first, you win. That's exactly what leela is doing here. So b3, king g7, finishing the manual castling. King b1, very useful move. Usually when you castle lone, you want to put your king on b1, sometimes even a1 to hide it in the corner. Takes. Now the b file is opened. This is a small concession. White is getting under some pressure here. f6, strengthening those pawns. Take a look at them. They are very menacing here. King a1, hiding in the corner, as I already told you. Knight b4. Now the knight is attacking the queen, the pawn, this pawn, and white decides to trade. And now suddenly black has the 2 bishops advantage. White's pieces are all horrible. This bishop is horrible. It cannot join the action because it's staring in its own pawns. The knights are very clumsy, like where to put the knights. Probably knight b3 would be good, but not ideal also. So rook h2. Hikaru wants to double over here and put pressure. Knight g4, immediately challenging this rook. We get a trade of rooks, but it's not easy to decide what to do next. Rook h1, attacking the black queen, but the queen just moves. And even though black is down a full rook for a pawn, the advantage of white is not that significant according to the engine. It's just plus 2.4. So not plus 4, which apparently should have been the case because there is a 4-pawn material deficit for black, but it's not felt because black is so active and all pieces of black are active and creating some threats like this fork by a knight, for example, like this attack with the bishops and the queen potentially on the king. So it's not comfortable to play with limited time against a strong engine, one of the strongest engines in the world. Queen a4, trying to activate the queen, but now just knight e3. And the bishop is attacked, and the problem is that how do you defend it? If you just go like rook here, this is very passive. The rook is stuck here, and black can continue with their plans. If you go bishop f1, this is just horrible. Look at this bishop, it's doing nothing. Black has, for example, bishop g4 is the top engine move, putting more pressure, and white will lose some material. So you have to do something. If you go here, for example, then you can get forked like this, and black is already not worse. So after knight e3, Hikaru decides to give this knight up, away, for counterplay. Hikaru takes the pawn on a6, and this bishop is challenged, but black has bishop c8, attacking the queen. The queen has to move back or forward, doesn't matter. The knight will take this bishop. And now black is down just an exchange. Black is down a rook for a knight or a bishop, for a rook for a bishop. So it's not that bad. But white finally has some counterplay. So knight c1, rotating the knight probably to put it on b3, which is a great square for the knight. But now the knight drops back to e3. It has also lots of interesting squares. It is iron, mostly probably just like controlling the squares, not threatening anything. But the knight is very, very beautiful here. So knight b3, knight g4. Suddenly it rotates back. There is a threat of knight f2 with a fork and winning the d3 pawn. Rook f1 prevents this. King g6, just slowly putting the king forward because it's already close to an endgame. And this was a pin, so it's useful to sidestep, step away from it. c5, trying to use this passed pawn for white, logical. Queen e8, a very subtle move. I think it's serving the purpose of an infiltration by the queen. Something like this. Knight rotates back to d2. Now the knight jumps back to e3, attacking the rook. Rook goes here, protecting the passed pawn and preventing and preparing the push. King h5, very, very interesting play by the engine here. So the king is just marching to take this pawn and to help the black pawns to just move forward. Very brave king. c5, and now just king g4. Crazy, like the king has no self-preservation instinct. And it turns out that it's hard to play against this, even though objectively it was not the best move according to Stockfish. According to Stockfish, it's unsafe, but Leela makes sometimes not objectively the best moves, but the moves that are hardest to play against, as I told you. So king g4, knight c4, trying desperately to trade off this beautiful knight. And black just trades because black can take one pawn. And this pawn is marching forward, and all white's pieces are stuck on the queen side. And even though white is still up material, significantly up material, and even though this king is potentially can be subject to a king hunt, the queen, it would take huge amounts of time for it to be transferred over here. That would have been great for white, but how to get there? In the meantime, the pawns will be rolling. And what to do? And you have like time ticking on your clock. So c7, trying to push the pawn. g4, it's a pawn race now. Knight c5, and suddenly it's equal according to Stockfish. So black can make a draw actually according to Stockfish, but there is some forced sequence of lines starting with king f3, queen here, takes, and then bishop. What? Bishop here? Don't ask me why. This is a crazy engine line. And then you go g3 and push this pawn, and white will have to give the rook for this pawn, and then it will be a drawn endgame. But instead of this, instead of going for this and going king f3, black is playing for a win. And black goes queen f8, which is objectively a bad move. Now white is enjoying some advantage, but it's very hard to prove it. Knight a4. King h4, just sidestepping to prepare the pawn push. Knight b6, bishop here, pinning the knight. But here, Hikaru finds a brilliant sequence of moves. He takes the bishop, he sacrifices the queen for two bishops. But now he wants to have a new queen, to make a new queen of his own. And he's actually winning. So Leela risked a lot to be lost. It could have made a draw, but it decided to play on because it's programmed not to make draws. Unless like it's horribly lost, then it can sometimes make a draw. Very, very rarely against strongest GMs. Like you can count on like the fingers of two hands GMs who have drawn Leela with rook odds in blitz. And suddenly, is Hikaru winning? b3, trying to go for some complications. And Hikaru is just pushing the pawn, making a new queen, and suddenly he gasps, queen a3, and he resigns. He resigns. He was winning, but he lost. He lost this game because, yes, he has a new queen, and it can check the black king, but the black king will just run away from checks. But black is threatening mate in one. Queen here is mate, and you cannot defend from it. The only move to defend is rook c2, giving up the rook, trying to defend. But then you just take the rook. Queen has to take. And then you just push this pawn, g3, or you can first trade the queens. Check. And then next you push g3, g2, g1 queen. And the knight is too far away from the action. It's not in time to stop the pawn. It will take eternity for this knight to stop the pawn. So Hikaru, after queen a3, realizes that rook c2 is losing and resigns the game.
Oh no, I just blundered. Oh my gosh, I just oh.
It was the first game of the match, and Hikaru was close to winning, but he could not do it. And then he started tilting and losing games. Let me show you another one. So in this game, Hikaru is playing with the black pieces, and he plays the Scandinavian defense, which is objectively not the best opening for black. But if you want to open up some files and trade the pieces, maybe it's a good choice against an engine playing down a rook. So takes, knight c3. This is actually a normal standard theory for the Scandinavian defense. Now, usually the queen goes to a5, or it goes to d8 or d6. There are three main lines here. He goes to d8. Bishop check, he drops, he blocks. Any trades favor black. And leela rook bot is programmed to avoid trades unless it's like absolutely necessary to trade. It's not necessary here, so bishop c4, e6. Now this bishop is a little bit stuck behind its own pawns. Knight f3, knight f6, d4, bishop c6, trying to activate the bishop like this, but now the knight does not go to the best square for the knight c6, so it's also kind of a concession. Knight e5 attacks this bishop, and it turns out that you shouldn't take this pawn. It's a pawn sacrifice because rook g1 attacks this bishop, and when it drops back somewhere, like you have files to attack, you have a lead in development for white. Why should you take? You shouldn't take a pawn if you are up a rook. You should finish your development. That's what Hikaru correctly decides. Goes bishop e7, just finishing development, preparing to castle, short probably. Castles. Bishop drops back to d3, potentially eyeing this pawn. Knight bd7. So it seems that the opening has gone all right for black. Black has finished development. It's still like +5 material advantage for black, extra rook, but it's those tiny imbalances that leela is so good at utilizing. So first rook e1, takes. Now this pawn attacks this knight. Knight goes here, queen g4, and now what's the imbalance in this position? The fact that white is preparing an attack on the king side, and black doesn't have enough material on the king side to be very comfortable. And white has 1, 2, 3 pieces that are already in the action. Potentially the rook might join the action. So everyone is on the king side for white. And it doesn't matter that on the queen side there is no rook on a1, there is no rook here. And that black has more material on the queen side because the king is on the king side. All logical, right? So Hikaru trades one pair of knights, which is usually good if you are up material. But there is bishop h6. Instead of taking the knight first, white threatens mate, and queen g7 is mate, so black has to do something. Now g6. Now white could have traded the bishop for a knight and then taken this a bishop for a rook and then taken this knight, but that would have left black in an easier position to defend, because now there is limited material on the board. There's just a bishop, a rook, and a queen, whereas black has a queen, 2 bishops, and a rook. So black is up just 1 bishop, but probably it will not be enough, the material for white. It will not be enough to checkmate black, so it's easier for Hikaru to play this. So within a span of 1 second, I'm not exaggerating, in 1 second, leela decides, correctly decides, by the way, Stockfish approves of this move, to take the knight instead. This bishop, it's stronger than this rook. This rook is just not doing anything there, and the bishop is creating threats around black king, and the black king and the dark squares around it are weakened, and potentially white will push the h pawn and attack the g6 square, the weak square, and maybe the rook will join the action, as I already told you. Everyone is on the king side for white, and the less pieces you have, even if you trade the bishop for a rook, the easier for your opponent it is to defend. So very, very good decision by leela. Instead of just disregarding this. Queen d5. Hikaru sees the danger. He knows that he is getting demolished if he doesn't do anything. So he decides to sacrifice a bishop to prevent a checkmating attack on himself. So that's how afraid he is of this attack, because it's a real danger, of course. So h4, as I already told you, again, not taking the rook. h4 is preventing h5, and then h takes, and that potentially could be a checkmate. So what does Hikaru do? He trades the queens at the cost of a bishop, because he's afraid of this. And here, first white finally takes this rook. and takes the bishop. And now Hikaru is just up a pawn in the ensuing endgame. But white's pawns are horrible. They are all split. And actually, it's a winning. It's a technically winning endgame for black. Also, the h4 pawn will fall. So it does fall. So Hikaru is up 2 pawns in this endgame. How can he not win this against any human? Like even Magnus, he wins this 10 out of 10 times because he has this h pawn that is passed. He has those weaknesses that he could attack. Like white has no counterplay at all. Can you believe me that when I say that Hikaru lost this game and that he did not really have a chance? Let me show this to you. So rook b1, attacking this pawn, b6, f4, bishop a7, a4, trying to create some chaos over there. a5, preventing those ideas. King f3, centralizing the king. Maybe the king goes here or here. Rook d8, taking the semi-open file. King e2, king g7, king f3, rook d5, king e4. How can white win this game? Can you believe that it's possible? Like, what is the plan for white? King f3, h6, king e4, f6. Black has to do something, so black decides to open up this diagonal. So that's exactly what happens. Now e6 and g6 become weak, but Hikaru correctly estimates this position as still winning for black, which it is. But now there is some rook g1 ideas, putting pressure on g6. What does Hikaru do? Sidesteps the g file. Now rook h1, poking and prodding. h5, rook g1, now attacking this pawn. Rook g8. It seems that everything is under control. Everything is all right here. Bishop c4, potentially pressuring this pawn. Rook d8, bishop d3 back, rook g8, bishop c4. Now, of course, Hikaru doesn't want to repeat the position because he's completely winning. So he takes the third pawn. But now, f5. And Hikaru's like, what? Of course I missed f5. And he became very tilted after this. He should have found king f6, which is actually still winning for black. Giving up the f pawn, so you can take the e pawn, or you can take the g pawn, doesn't matter, still it's winning. Instead, he decides to go for a bishop with 3 pawns against a rook endgame. So he takes, check, takes. So Hikaru is still very much better and maybe even close to winning, but maybe not winning, but it's only black in a practical game between humans that can like press in this game, because black can march the king, take this pawn and create this passed pawn, and even give up both of the pawns on the king side. So Hikaru tries to do that. He marches with his king, he gives up 1 pawn, check. Now the king drops back, he attacks the rook, he goes here, he wants to put the bishop here and take this pawn. But turns out that you cannot execute this plan, because, for example, if I go here, if you take here, c3 is a problem and you lose this bishop. So instead, here he goes king b2, not allowing the king to join the action. Rook h4, king here. So if you take here, I'll take here. The rook needs to stay guardian. Now we get some shuffling on the board. Now the h-pawn starts marching. Now you have ideas of bishop here, and like looks like black is making some progress. Rook b3 check, king e2, bishop here, check, drops back, the king marches forward, but the bishop is holding everything together. These all pawns are protected by each other and by the bishop. Rook here, bishop drops back, c4 with ideas of c5, bishop here, preventing, king b5. Now the kings dance a little bit, c5. White decides to change the game a little bit. Takes. Now this is a drawn position. Even if black loses all the pawns, but gets the king here and prevents like checkmating ideas, black is drawing this game. Because, yeah, it's a theoretical draw, rook and a flank pawn against the bishop of the correct color. I think it's a draw, actually, if I'm not mistaken. But it's if the king, provided that the king is in time to stop this pawn. But black, of course, does not have to give up all the pawns. Black has great pawns, H pawn, A pawn, B pawn. So black can just wait, right? So black waits, gives up one pawn, waits, 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 waits. It's still a draw, still a draw, still a draw. It's still a draw. Some checks, but it's still a draw. Yeah, it doesn't change anything. Yes, the king is cut off on the f file, but it's still a draw because what can white do? Nothing. So it's still a draw, and suddenly black makes a mistake. One mistake. And it's not even clear, like bishop b4 is what draws the game, apparently. But it's hard for a human to understand the difference between those two moves. But the difference is that now black's king is completely cut off. And what white will do is, at some point, march the king to this pawn. Then the rook will go also here and sacrifice itself for this pawn and the bishop. And then king will take this pawn, go back here, go here, and the pawn will queen. And the black king will not be in time to stop this. This is exactly what happens. So now the black king is cut off even here. And this is exactly what happens. The king goes to the b pawn. And now black just resigns because next rook will take, bishop takes, then king takes, and this pawn queens.
Yeah, I got my king cut by one or too many. Okay, this is insane.
Wow, how does Leela do this? So Hikaru, at some point, he lost, I think, the first 5 games in the match. And it was horrible. It was painful to watch. Usually, it's Hikaru who does this to other people. Now it's this silicon monster who's doing this to Hikaru. But he managed to get some points. So let me show you, I think, the first game in the match where he scored some points. Let me show this to you. I will not spoil the result. So Hikaru is playing with the white pieces. He goes e4. We get the Sicilian defense. Again, with the rook odds, obviously. So it's a little bit different opening. We get this kind of structure, d5. Resembles actually the French defense now. So if white goes e5 and then knight drops to d7, it's like the typical French. But instead, white decides to trade to open up the position a little bit. It's generally good to open the position up if you are up material. Takes, castles, bishop here, knight here, finishes development. And white has a great position out of the opening. Queen c2, taking this pawn, h6, knight e5. The knight is beautifully placed here, putting pressure. Knight d7. Now you can trade a pair of knights, which Hikaru happily does, reducing the tension on the board. Now another knight is coming to e5. Great decision. Knight takes on d4. Potentially it can rotate to e5 or it can go to b5. a6 prevents going to b5 now. Bishop e3. Yes, black can take and enjoy the two bishops advantage, but that will reduce the material on the board even more. Not good for Leela's chances. So instead, Leela decides to go bishop d6, putting pressure over here. h3, check. And now e5, creating some chaos on the board. By the way, reminds me of a recent game between Pragnananda Ramesh Babu and Gukesh Namaraju in rapid chess in Croatia. They recently played it. Very interesting tournament, by the way. Drop a comment if you want me to analyze some of those games. So e5, bishop h2 check, and then e5 is exactly what happened in this game, and Gukesh won a nice game there. So knight f3, taking the bishop because it's no longer protected by the queen. But now e4, the queen is again protecting this bishop. Bishop takes, bishop b5 check, and suddenly the king is in the crossfire. White has to sacrifice the rook for the bishop. But first, black takes this e3 bishop. Now the f file is open and the king is a little bit weak for white. Bishop g3 first, because this rook will not go anywhere. Rook d1, now trades, and rook a8. Because of course, if we trade the rooks, then white has better chances to win with less material on the board and an extra piece. Now there is unknown pressure over there. Bishop drops back, g6. g6 is useful because queen d3 was coming with queen h7 ideas. So g6, bishop here, putting pressure over this diagonal. Hikaru is playing a great game. He's completely winning. Yes, he lost a rook for a bishop, but he's still up a full piece and a pawn. Rook e7, rook d4, king here, queen d3. Now we have a battery over there. Very strong play by Hikaru. Queen here, king e2. Now probably he wants to hide the king somewhere there because it was not feeling safe. Queen here. Now pressure on the e-file. The king cannot go back because this pawn will be hanging. So bishop d5, f5. Maybe black wants to push f4 at some point. Maybe black just wants to prevent e4 from happening, which is, I think, a likelier motivation for the f5 move. Bishop b3, bishop draws back, bishop c2, bishop b6. Now putting even more pressure. e4. Hikaru decides to sacrifice yet another rook for the bishop because like he cannot remove this rook anywhere that would be fatal. So black is playing very, I would say, precise technical chess, finding all the resources. But still, black is down material even with this trade, bishop for a rook. Black is still lost because white has a bishop and a knight for the rook, and white has this very powerful passed pawn on e-file, and it's going forward, and black is not stopping it too easily. Queen b5 is a great spot, forking the king and the pawn, but c4 attacks the queen and defends the pawn, so queen c6 draws back. Queen d5. Of course, if we get this trade, then connected passed pawns just decide the game. Of course, black does not trade. Instead, black goes queen e8, putting pressure over here, even though at the moment this pawn is well protected. c5. Queen b5 again. Now it's again a fork, and there is no longer a c4 to block, and this pawn on b2 will fall. He blocks, check, and a5. Still white is winning, but it's hard. It's really hard. And blitz and against leela, it's practically impossible to win. Will Hikaru be able to convert this? So bishop here threatens mate in one. Of course, leela spots this. Rook g7. The rook is a little bit weirdly placed here, but it's serving various purposes. It's defending everything. e6, pushing the pawn. He wants to push the pawn and queen it. b5, striking back, attacking the bishop. C takes b4, b6 on en passant. Queen check, queen check, queen check. Now, if white goes here, there will probably be a move repetition and a draw. Hikaru wants to play for a win, so he goes here. Queen takes with check, and the king runs to g3. Check, queen e5. Of course, again, the queen trade will be favorable for white. It will be a winning position because the pawn will then march and queen. So instead, black takes the bishop, but Hikaru correctly calculated that e7 is coming and e8 queen will come next. So black has to give up the rook for this pawn. Rook g8, queen. And now we get this position. Hikaru has an extra knight. And also black's king is very, very weak. There should be some checkmate in this position. There should be. Even like there are ideas to trade the queens like this, queen g6. If it's white to move here, queen g6 wins. Because king takes, knight e5 is a check and a fork, and the queen is lost. So, of course, that would have been great, but it's black to move, and black takes another pawn. And now black has some counterplay of their own. A passed pawn, but black is close to getting checkmated. Check. Knight e5. Now, this is threatened. This is threatened. This is threatened. Everything is threatened. Queen drops back. Queen a7. Queen checks from b3. King drops back. There are no more checks. Again, this is threatened. This is threatened. How can black escape this? a4. Desperately. Playing with what black has. Black has just this passed pawn as the only trump in the position. Check. 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 Discover check by the queen. King f7. King f6. And at this point, Hikaru on his stream was like, how am I not immediately winning this? How am I not immediately checkmating my opponent? Like the bots, they just find all the best moves. Knight d4, attacking the queen. Queen c4. Knight f3. Check. Now it's hard to escape from checks for white. Check. Queen g1. Okay, white escapes from checks, but the queen on g1 is not a good piece. Queen drops back. Now Black is still preparing the marching of the pawn, the a pawn. Queen a1 is a check. Knight a5, attacking the queen. Hikaru is finding some great moves. He's still winning. Queen e4, knight f3, queen c6, queen a3, checking the king. King drops back. Queen e3, checking the king. King goes here. Knight e5, attacking the queen. Queen goes here. Now, this is the moment where Hikaru, well, he was under pressure and time pressure, but of course he should have traded the queens. He just missed the fact that this is a check, and he can trade the queens and win this endgame because the knight is stopping this pawn and the pawn is not queening. But unfortunately, in this position, he did not see queen d3. He went queen c3, which is still winning. a3. But if you take this pawn, I'll take your knight. What to do? He decides to take this pawn. He does not find a way to go forward. He was still winning. He should have checked his opponent and then gone knight b4, stopping this pawn. And then he would be preparing capturing of this pawn. And if you go here, for example, you can continue checks and win this pawn eventually. The engine gives queen c6 check as the best line. Then if here, then queen here. And if here, then queen here. But it's hard to find in blitz. What if black just goes a2? It's not easy to understand that this, apparently, like this, what is the win? I don't see a win. This is a fork. And then you just take this pawn. But it's very hard to calculate this even in classical, and in blitz, close to impossible. So Hikaru here decides to give up the knight for this pawn. But now it's close to a draw because this king is weak, and yes, white has an extra pawn, but it will be a perpetual check. So check. White is up 2 pawns now, but it's a perpetual. Check, 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 check. And it's a draw. And Hikaru cannot win. He gets a half a point. It's already better than losing 5 games in a row, but he wants to win desperately. He tries to play some more games. He says, one more game on the stream. One more game and we'll stop. One more game. I'll win and we'll stop.
Okay, that's horrible. Let's do one more. I mean, I refuse to believe that that's the best I can do.
And he cannot win. He draws a couple of more games, but he cannot win. He loses a couple of more games. He doesn't know what to do. And then comes the game where the human finally defeats the machine. Let me show this to you. So Hikaru is playing with the white pieces. e4. We get the Sicilian again. Very weird looking Sicilian with the knight on g6, but still okay. Rook e1. Hikaru is playing principal chess, developing the pieces, putting the rook in the center, preparing to open up the position because the king of the opponent is still in the center. Bishop e7. Bishop draws back. Castles. g3. g3 is a good move to restrict the g6 knight because now the g6 knight has no squares. Bishop here. d5. Takes. Again, Hikaru decides to open the position because he's up a rook. Takes, and now knight e5. Good move. Now this bishop will be traded, and it will make Hikaru's task easier of winning this game. Up a rook. Takes. Knight here. Now a pair of knight disappears from the board. Takes. Now this game Hikaru played at like 99% accuracy. He made no mistakes. Just look at the work of the master. Grandmaster. Hikaru Nakamura. Queen f3. Of course, if they trade the queens, white easily wins, so queen drops back. Knight d2. Now finishing development of the knight. Rook d8. Knight b3. Overprotecting the d4 pawn. Rook d5. King drops back. h5. Trying to push h4. Okay, bishop e3. You can push h4. h4. Rook d1. Just playing normal chess. Developing your pieces, putting rooks on the semi-open files, preparing to trade materials and win the game, up a rook. h3, queen g4. Now this pawn will fall. Yes, it advanced far enough to create some threats, potentially queen g2 checkmate, but black is not in time to create those threats because the pawn will die very soon. Queen here, knight c1. First, white stops black from capturing this pawn. Now this pawn is threatened, so white stops black from capturing it on b2. c4. Queen takes h3. Finally, this pawn falls and the potential source of counterplay for black evaporates. Queen c6. Bishop d2. Preparing to protect the c3 pawn. b5, queen g2. Now this rook is pinned. Queen a6. Takes. Knight e2. Activating the knight. Black can take this pawn, but it will not help black. Bishop here. Knight f4. Now white wants to trade all the pieces. Takes. That would be great for white, because then black would have just a queen and a rook against a queen and two rooks, which is not good. Takes. Now black objectively could have taken this, but like it's not in a practical game. When you down a rook, it's not a good idea. So instead black goes queen a5, bishop draws back, black takes a pawn. But now queen e4, centralizing the queen. Very precise play by Hikaru, not allowing any counter chances. a5, queen e2. Now eyeing this pawn, because the queen currently is guarding it, but when you kick the queen back, the c4 pawn will fall. Rook here, rook a1. Queen here, rook c1. Queen draws back. What did I tell you? This pawn is now up for grabs. Queen takes c4. So Hikaru methodically eliminates all sources of counterplay from his opponent. That is exactly what you should do when you are playing up material. You should learn from the great player. Rook b2. Putting some pressure, desperately creating some threats, but just queen e2. Calmly defending everything. Knight goes here, potentially to put pressure on c3. Okay, c4. Eliminating again sources of counterplay for black. Knight goes here, wanting to take here. Okay, queen e3, preventing this. e5, bishop c3, attacking the rook and defending this pawn. What next? Rook b3, pinning this bishop. Okay, d takes e5. Knight goes here, probably to block this pawn. Okay, rook takes a5. Finally, like this rook is now joining the action. White is completely winning, and Hikaru has eliminated all sources of counterplay for his opponent, which is not that hard for him because his opponent has just a rook, a knight, and a queen. And Hikaru has two rooks, a bishop, and a queen. But still, it's impressive how he just sees everything and stops everything. Knight e6, h4. Just calmly preventing knight g5, preventing another resource from his opponent. Rook takes rook b8, rook a1. Now he wants to trade the rooks, doubling on this file. King h7, rook e1, waiting. Rook b3, queen e4. So he correctly decides, Hikaru, to trade the queens, even giving up this c3 bishop, because he knows that with no queens on the board and an extra exchange and two pawns, he will easily win this game. He has an extra exchange, rook for knight, and extra two pawns. So he's good at converting such advantages, of course, even against machines. So rook a7, now he trades one pawn for another. And now he trades a rook for a knight because he understands that this is easily winning. This is easier. You will not fall prey to any knight forks. So he just decides to take this pawn to give up the E and C pawns, but have the F and G pawns connected past pawns in the rook endgame that are easily winning. Even I probably would have won this against any engine. So he takes and just goes back and starts pushing those pawns. Advancing the king. Very easily, technically winning position. Slowly, not rushing anything. Now this is a checkmate that is threatened, so black has to go back. Now rook here, and this is threatened, and actually black can do nothing about it. So white wins the rook, and the rest is like technicality. He just promotes and checkmates, and humanity scores this important point against the machine.
There we go. All right, finally we got a win.
Actually, Hikaru won 2 games in this match, but it's crazy that he lost 7 games. He drew 5 games and he won just 2 games. So at the end of the day, the match score is 9.5 to 2.5 in favor of the machine, even though Hikaru was playing upper rook. This is crazy, guys. Please drop a comment. What do you think about those games? Should I analyze more of such computer versus humans games? Should I play an odds match myself? I played actually one against this bot. The video is in this channel. I will link it in the description, but should I play another one? Probably. trying my luck in a longer time control, because in Blitz, of course, I will lose all the games probably. And yeah, thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and see you in the next one.